A sad truth about famous cook Anne Burrell has come to light just when fans thought they knew everything about her. At 54, the woman who was known for her fiery cooking and contagious laugh has died. The guy who knew her best is now breaking the silence. Her husband has finally spoken out, and what he says about the terrible day she spent dying will leave you speechless. Don't leave us yet. The truth is much deeper than anyone thought. Anne Burrell was more than just a cook. She had a lot of power. She had a lot of fans all over the world because of her wild personality, spiky blonde hair, and no-nonsense approach in the kitchen. But behind the laughs, the fame from the Food Network, and the many TV shows, not many people knew what was really going on in her personal life. Fans and people who work in the food industry are shocked that Anne has died at the age of 54. But it gets even stranger after this. For weeks, there were only rumors, honors, and whispers on social media. Everyone wasn't sure what had happened. Her family didn't say anything. Her friends wrote hazy goodbyes on Facebook. Then, out of the blue, her husband spoke up. Not only did what he say surprise us, it also changed everything we thought we knew. This video goes into great detail about the sad, strange, and sometimes emotional last part of Anne Burrell's life. We'll go over the facts, the schedule, and the rumors that have been going around since her sudden death, from the problems that happened behind the scenes to what her husband finally said in a private interview. Take a seat, because what's coming next will blow your mind. What did Anne Burrell really do? Why did her husband not say anything for so long? What finally comes out of his statement? Let's start. It looked like everything was fine in the weeks before Anne Burrell died. She was still on social networks, posting happy pictures of food and even teasing a few projects that are coming up. Fans had no reason to think something was wrong. But now that I look back, there were signs. There were hints in her tone, in the breaks between her usually happy words, and in how often she withdrew from public view. Anne quietly cancelled 2 cooking gigs in early spring, saying that she had to take care of personal issues. A few close co-workers thought she looked more worn out than usual. One friend, one of the people who worked with Anne on a holiday show last year, said she was less talkative and not like herself. She smiled, but not enough for tears to come out. No one really thought the worst though, but behind closed doors, something very different was happening. Sources close to the family say that Anne had been dealing with a serious illness behind closed doors, which she decided not to tell anyone about. Her choice was very personal. She didn't want sympathy. She didn't want to be in the news. She didn't want to be known as a woman in pain, but as the passionate chef who made the kitchen shine. But now comes the scary part. Even her friends, who read every post she made, didn't notice how bad things had gotten. When she stopped using social media all of a sudden, it was just seen as a much-needed break. Some people thought she was just shooting. Others thought she and her husband, Stuart Claxton, were finally taking a break from the press after a busy few years of marriage and fame. But Anne was quietly getting ready for the worst to happen behind the scenes. A person close to the family said that she had written signed letters to her husband, her close friends, and even some of her fans. These letters had not yet been made public. We're starting to understand how much she was going through by herself now that more information is coming to light. But that's not all, because even the people closest to her were shocked by what her husband said in his speech. Fans were sad, shocked, and full of open questions on social media when the news of Anne Burrell's death first came out. But there was one question that stood out the most. What does her husband not say? Stuart Claxton, Anne's husband of just under 5 years, didn't say a word for days and then weeks. There was no post, statement, or even thank you to the thousands of friends who were sad about her death. People online began to make up stories about this silence. Was he in too much pain to talk? Was something being kept secret? Was there more to Anne's death than people were telling you? Stuart finally told the world the truth, which was very emotional and much more complicated than anyone had thought. Stuart said something that stopped everyone in their tracks in an honest interview that she gave to a close family friend, and that was later confirmed by People magazine. I promised her there were no public tears, news shows, or other attention on her death. She wanted to be alone. Until everyone could understand. Yes, you read that right. Before she died, Anne Burrell, the brave and loud cook we all knew, made a very private and open choice. She told her husband not to say anything right away. She didn't want her death to be in the news. She did not want to become famous for dying, and Stuart did what she asked him to do. He admitted that he had trouble sleeping at night because people were charging him of hiding something online, even if it meant dealing with hate and rumors. Some people even thought that they had broken up before she died, which he strongly denied. He even said that Anne's last few weeks were full of private moments, soft music in the kitchen, notes written by hand and left on their fridge, and one last dinner that she cooked just for him. Stuart said in a low voice she made her favorite lasagna. She told me that night, "Don't remember me in a hospital bed. Remember me in the kitchen like this, laughing, making things." Those were some of the last things she said to him. Stuart didn't stay quiet out of avoidance. It was for loyalty, but as the stories spread about the woman he loved, he knew he had to speak out, not to clear his own name, but to protect hers. Still, what he said next shocked even those who were closest to Anne. In the eyes of most people, Anne Burrell was full of life, sass, and confidence. With her straightforward but caring style, she ran kitchens, lit up TV screens, and taught a huge number of young chefs how to cook. But even the toughest people have fights going on inside, and Anne's was one she didn't want anyone to see. People who knew Anne well say that she had been quietly dealing with an autoimmune disease that had gotten worse over the last 2 years. For her own privacy's sake, the details have not been made public. But several sources confirmed that it was caused by long-term inflammation, tiredness, and unpredictable pain flare. That made it hard for her to move around and keep going, but she never let the camera see it. Anne was very good at hiding how uncomfortable she was. She would smile even though it hurt, cook while perched quietly on the counter, and record scenes ahead of time in short bursts to hide the times she lost her energy. Producers, close friends, and of course her husband Stuart were the only ones who knew how hard it was for her to keep going. A director from Worst Cooks in America remembered that Anne would limp in between takes. There were only 2 days left to shoot, but she turned it on right away like nothing was wrong. That's what she was. Don't feel sorry for her, just honor her. What's even more sad is that Anne didn't tell her co-workers about most of her fight. She was afraid that telling people about her illness would change how they treated her and take away the power she had built up in the business. She had worked hard for decades to build her image in the male-dominated world of cooking, and she wasn't going to let illness ruin her legacy. Sadly, her health took a sudden turn for the worse earlier this year. In his private statement, Stuart said that Anne had been admitted twice in the 6 months before she died. The first time was for what doctors called a sudden systemic flare, and the second time was just a few weeks before she died. She told her husband not to tell anyone, not even her family, until she got home. She told me that this hole is just a pothole and not the end of the road. But Anne's body was really starting to shut down. Even though her heart stayed strong, her health got worse faster than anyone could have imagined. In the last few weeks of her life, Anne decided to stop all of her intense treatment and go back to her home, where she felt most at ease, with her husband, her 2 cats, and the smell of her favorite meals cooking on the stove. In a quiet moment, she walked by Stuart, who held her hand. Stuart said she died the way she lived, strong, stubborn, and full of love. Even more sad is the fact that fans and even close friends of the star didn't know about it. 10 days before she died, she shared a happy kitchen picture with the world. Her story doesn't end here, though, because what Stuart found after she died changed everything and showed Anne's one last surprise that no one saw coming. Stuart Claxton was doing what most grieving spouses do, going through old photos. This was just a few days after Anne Burrell had died. He was unable to rest. When he walked into the kitchen, he thought he would hear her humming. When he opened the door, he saw her favorite apron still hanging there. But what he found next shocked him. There was a stack of handmade letters in the back of Anne's desk. Each one was sealed, dated, and sent to the people who were most important to her. Friends, family, other cooks, and even her fans. Anne wrote a real, heartfelt letter to her fans and put it in an envelope with the words, "To the ones who watched me cook." As of now, the letter has been made public with her estate's permission, and the words inside made everyone who read them feel sick. That means I'm no longer yelling Saul at the TV if you're reading this, but don't be sad. Do not do that. My dream came true. I stood in kitchens all over the world. I made friends who became family, and I got to share what I love with a lot of people. The letter went on. I am aware that I was loud. I know I was a little crazy, but I hope my crazy made you stronger in life and with food. If you ever made a dish and said, I'm proud of that, I will always be proud of it. Anne also wrote letters to friends like chefs Alex Gornasheli and Jeffrey Zacharian. After she died, many of these friends shared their sadness and thanks on social media. There was one letter that touched me the most though. It was to Stuart, a family friend who read parts of Anne's letter to her husband out loud at a private gathering, said it was full of deep, loving humor and sadness. She thanked him for putting up with a kitchen that always looked like it had been hit by a storm, for being there for her when she wanted to try gluten-free pasta, even though it tasted like cardboard, and for loving her deeply even when things were tough. She wrote, "You were my home. You made me feel calm when I didn't have any. Just make something messy and tasty if you ever miss me. I'll be there yelling at you to stop cooking the onions too long." Stuart said that finding the letters made him finally say something. He saw that Anne hadn't just given up and accepted her fate. She was ready for it, not out of fear, but out of fierce love. The way she said goodbye wasn't sad, it was happy. Marie-Anne also left behind a USB drive with a bunch of recipes she never shared. Her estate is currently working on turning those into a cookbook after her death, which will be called Anne's Last Kitchen. The money raised will go toward giving cooking scholarships to students who need them. Anne thought about how to help others even after she died. There is one more twist in the story before we end this part. Even the news media were caught off guard, because as word got out that Anne had died, a controversial person from her past came back to life with a very different story. Just as everyone was beginning to accept Anne Burrell's death as a quiet loss, a voice from her past came back out loud, unexpected, and very controversial. Within 48 hours of her husband's statement going public, a former Food Network co-worker who had worked with Anne on many productions behind the scenes broke their silence in a post that has since gone viral on X, formerly Twitter. What they said shocked people in the entertainment and cooking industries. The producer, who was not named, said in the post that Anne's death wasn't as easy and peaceful as some had made it seem. Anne and I worked together for a long time. She was very smart, but she was under a lot of real pressure, the kind that makes people break down in private. What the government said, not even close. How things really went behind the scenes is not being talked about. The post didn't directly accuse anyone of wrongdoing, but it definitely suggested that Anne had been through a lot of production stress, network disputes, and growing tensions because her health was getting worse. According to the source, executives knew about these problems but never told the public about them. The claims got a lot of attention. Fans, who were still upset about Anne's death, wanted to know what happened. Did the network put too much pressure on her? Did she work even though she was sick, so she wouldn't break her contracts? Did she choose to stay quiet in public, or was she forced to? Some papers ran with it, with questions like, was Anne Burrell forced to silence concerns about her health? A former director says a TV star worked so much that they died. Things get even messy from here on out. In a podcast interview, another former co-star, who asked to stay anonymous, strongly denied those claims. We all had busy schedules, but Anne was the only one who spoke up when something seemed wrong. She wasn't shut up. She wouldn't give up. She called herself. She chose to keep quiet about her illness if she did. What is the truth? It's really somewhere in the middle. Since then, several sources have revealed that Anne had become angry with the stress of keeping up a certain public image over the past few years. There was worry, but she wasn't forced to hide her illness. Some people, mostly network directors, thought that her brand might suffer if people found out she was sick. And Anne, who is very protective of her image, probably took that to heart. Stuart even talked about this strain in his speech, saying that Anne didn't want sympathy. You shouldn't feel bad for her, she told them. She didn't want them to be moved by her pain, but by her food. That's why she didn't tell anyone. That was what made her strong. But yes, she did feel that stress. We both did. That being said, the charge of a cover-up may not be true, but the emotional truth is harder to deny. Anne Burrell was in a battle with both her body and the standards of a business that doesn't often treat the weak with respect. Because of these claims, There were a lot of noise from fans asking for more openness in TV contracts and production standards, especially for stars who have long-term health problems. But Anne was still at the center of it all, a woman whose name was now remembered for more than just cooking shows and catchphrases. She was seen as a sign of strength, quiet pain, and a bigger problem in the entertainment business that no one wanted to talk about, up until now. As this video comes to a close, Anne's story has one more lesson that everyone needs to discover. In his last interview, Stewart said something that made everyone in the room cry. When there had been weeks of quiet, rumors and mixed feelings, Stewart Claxton finally agreed to do one last interview. He said it would be the last thing he said in public about his wife Anne Burrell. He wasn't trying to get famous. Because he was mad, he didn't want to clear the air. He did it so everyone would remember what kind of person Anne was, not just as a famous person, but as a person. I saw a woman who danced barefoot in the kitchen, cried at Pixar movies, and made grilled cheese at 2 a.m. What other people saw was a crazy chef on TV. Because they didn't have time to do anything else, those softly spoken words were heard all over the news and on social media. The people got a full picture of the famous woman and what she stood for the first time. She did more than just cook. She linked people, helped them, motivated them, and made failing fun. People were told it was okay to mess up a meal because the important thing was to try again. Fans are sad about her death, and famous people are talking about how kind she was behind the scenes. Now Stewart is using his grief to start a foundation in Anne's honor, which she would have enjoyed. No matter their past or struggles, the Anne Burrell Culinary Courage Fund will help poor and chronically ill culinary students follow their dreams. Anne always said to work in the kitchen if you could handle the heat. I'll stand next to you if you can't. That's the way her heart worked. People will still use her recipes. Her catchphrases will be heard in kitchens for years to come, but what will really matter is when a nervous, self-doubting cook tries a recipe they thought they couldn't do and nail it, because Anne's real gift wasn't her skill, it was her faith in other people. Before this story ends, we remember Anne Burrell for more than just her food. We remember her fire, her fight, and the quiet strength she carried until the end. Thank you from all of us, Anne. You were the real deal. We're now going to talk to her friends, followers, and people who grew up watching her rule the kitchen. Have you ever made something because of Anne? Do you remember the first time she made you laugh on TV? That, or you just admired how brave, honest, or bold she was? Please tell us what you think in the space below. Tell us your favorite Anne Burrell story or food that makes you think of her. Not only to help this channel, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, but to keep Anne's story going. Click the bell sign to make sure you don't miss any stories that aren't in the news. This should be shared with someone who needs to hear it if it touched you in any way. Anne's memory deserves more than silence. Just like she would have wanted, it's worth a roar.